the greatest advice Wayne has ever given me, and it's a constant, it's less of advice and more of a constant reminder, which I love him so much for saying this to me, is, you know, he's always just like, man, please be yourself. Please don't ever try and be me or anybody else. Don't ever go get tattoos. You don't have to dress any different.
I got Cole as my one. I'm hoping that Kendrick's next album could try to fix that for me. Drake is doing his Chuck E. Cheese shit. Yeah, good for him.
Because if Drake's career at this very moment in time is defined by anything, it's inconsistency.
You are silent in all black issues, Drake. You really are. You are really, really silent. I don't hear about anything. You don't stand for nothing. You don't say nothing about nothing. You don't. It's just what it is.
But to the people that believe that underneath all of this megastardom is a passive, timid, pandering Canadian man, like when you start going to these memes of how he looks at LeBron with this fucking "you my dad" look, how he looked at not Karl Anthony Towns, DeMarcus Cousins, the Kentucky picture. Like there's whole collages made how he behaved on the shop. And this is maybe psychological, but it just appears that when the alphas come in, or when the money niggas come in a different example, you become who you are.
One of the biggest burdens of being the biggest figure in your space is dealing with polarization. You see, it's so easy to get lost in the conversations regarding hip-hop and Drake's status within hip-hop as being either helpful or harmful, because amongst the sea of bullshit that you come across, there are things about Drake's presence and career that are undeniably harmful but equally helpful. As the saying goes, heavy is the head that wears the crown. And with being the biggest rapper in the world comes the unfair and burdensome responsibility of representing an entire genre properly. And when the standards that were followed by the legends who came before you are now being violated, and being violated by you in particular, it's gonna be a problem. And for all intents and purposes, you could look at Drake's career as one big violation. The interesting part though, however, is that some of his violations actually helped to further the genre, as he would go on to popularize a new expression of vulnerable masculinity with introspective and deeply personal lyrics, which also went in conjunction with his decision to emphasize mixing the style of rapping with R&B melodies, which is easily Drake's best and most notable contribution to hip-hop. Because these days, I think you would struggle to find a rapper who doesn't incorporate melodies or like sing-songy type flows into their music, or even R&B artists who never incorporate rap flows and content into their albums, and it's directly due to Drake's success with that style of hip-hop and R&B throughout the 2010s decade. This evolvement of hip-hop reminds me a lot of the evolvement of mixed martial arts. You see, in the beginning, MMA was formed to figure out which style of fighting was the best, whether it was karate or jiu-jitsu or wrestling or boxing. And what they discovered is that no one particular style of fighting is really better than the other. Instead, they figured out that a fusion of all the different aspects of those styles is the best style of fighting. And the same thing has happened in this era of rap, where people realize that no one particular style of rapping can be dominant anymore. It's no longer good enough to just be a street rapper or a boom bap rapper or some lyrical miracle rapper, right? If you want to be considered one of the best rappers alive today, you have to be more than someone who can just rap really fast and say a bunch of words that rhyme, but ultimately don't really say nothing like this bullshit.
To hop up in a minivan and get up out of the city, it's a pity. I'm a villain with a dim and it was really bad. I gotta get away, I'm out of state, but I be heading back. I sped up on a gas, I'm on an interstate and really fast. The foot is on the pedal, man, I could've got a medal like a sprinter, cause I'm winning when I'm moving like Apollo. When I'm racing with the police at a pace, you getting followed. Now they're chasing me to Vegas like I'm OJ and the Bronco to the Baco. When they said he was the man and then a criminal, despicable defendant of the federal municipal. He killed his freaking wife and got away, it's unforgivable. But then again, I'm taking it, the jury was to finish.
Eminem, you will rue the day for inspiring these f***ing creatures to invade the culture.
You'll rue this day, you'll rue it!
But because of Drake's early innovation, this big boom of rappers developing a greater skill set was born, as rappers now had to be good lyrically, have substance to their content, be able to create songs with great hooks and bridges and melodies, all while having a great ear for production, and getting into more risk-taking ventures with their music. But with the good comes the bad. And the bad cannot be ignored to truly understand the full impact that Drake has had on hip-hop. Because while yes, his violations included aspects that pushed hip-hop forward, there are some violations that have gone against the spirit of hip-hop, and they cannot be overlooked. Hip-hop is a competitive sport, and everyone who's a great rapper believes that they are the best rapper alive, including Drake. So inevitably, once the field starts to establish themselves as contenders for the #1 spot, you begin to see rappers start to crown themselves on records, and subsequently, that's when the fans will start pitting people against each other. These discussions tend to fan the flames over the conversations about
who's the best MCs, Biggie, Jay-Z, and Nas.
In our generation's case, Kendrick, Drake, and J. Cole, the big three of the 2010s.
A few moments later.
Well, I guess at this point, formerly known as the Big Three, because boy is it clear that Kendrick Lamar has not enjoyed the idea of being compared to other rappers in his generation, especially not the vanilla vagabond himself, Aubrey Graham. For those who are not in the know, the beef between Kendrick Lamar and Drake has been a thing since at least 2013, starting with Kendrick's legendary Control verse where he called out all of his peers in hip-hop by name, letting them all know that he views them as competition and that furthermore, he's looking to smoke all of them when it comes to who's going to be considered #1. In the words of a famous billionaire fraud,
It's funny how one verse can fuck up the game.
and in this one verse, he definitely had the rap game all f***ed up because it was the first time in a long time where a rapper had openly challenged his peers and brought back that competitive spirit to hip-hop. And while I personally believe that songs like Control don't necessarily age the best, the people that Kendrick name dropped mostly took it as a compliment, as it should have been. This was Kendrick's way of acknowledging the field and pointing out people that he views as competition. And only those who are truly great are acknowledged publicly by other greats. But Drake interpreted the verse very differently.
I feel like that's it. It's like, you know, he's the new guy to love, and of course, I mean, rightfully so. He's super talented, you know. But he's like, you know, he is the underdog.
Okay, that's hate.
And he's doing his thing really well. And that verse was, he's giving people like moments, you know, like that verse was a moment to talk about. Are you listening to it now?
Okay, that's hate.
At this point in time? Okay. And then, but it was real cool for like, you know, a couple weeks. But like, if I asked you, for example, like, how does that verse start? No, do you remember?
Yo, all bullshit aside, this was simply not a good response, as Drake came off super sensitive and defensive. Because once again, if you yourself has acknowledged that hip-hop is competitive and you have been crowning yourself as #1 in all your raps, and furthermore claim to have raps ready to defend yourself against multiple unnamed rappers.
I never thought Kendrick, but there's a couple other people I thought would have called my name by now that I never did. But
oh, is that what you're waiting for, the name call?
I'm waiting for it. I'm ready for it. Not waiting for it, but I'm ready for it. I'm not the guy, but there's a reason why they don't call my name. I'm not the guy. I'm not the one.
That's actually cap, because if that was true, then why take on this passive-aggressive attitude towards Kendrick? Why not just shoot back? He didn't come at you solely. He didn't even come at any of your loved ones. He didn't your girl. He didn't try to rob you. All he said was, I am better than all you rappers, and I'm gonna make that known to the entire world, and if you feel a way about it, come do something. And after this Elliott Wilson interview, Drake would continue with this weird dismissal of Kendrick in interviews with Angie Martinez, and even an ESPN interview with Marcellus Wiley, where apparently Drake was cursing out Kendrick so bad that even his own team knew that it wouldn't be a good look if the interview had come out. And because of this, they allegedly told ESPN to not release the interview, or else Drake would no longer be the host of the ESPYs. This is the same guy who really expects us to believe that he was waiting for Kendrick to come at him for 10 years?
The audience not dumb. Shape the stories how you want. Hey Drake, they're not slow.
Hey, gangster, we're really not that slow. I promise you. We can keep up. But as their careers went forward, all we ever really got were subliminal sneak disses back and forth, and we as the fans would do the nerdiest, no-life bullshit and try to decipher all the potential meanings of each subliminal diss, or even if they were subliminal disses to begin with. But they never met in the ring at the time where both parties were clashing for the throne, and it's not from a lack of trying, as Kendrick did try to call him out to the dance as often as he could. But since neither party wanted to formally engage, and both Kendrick and Drake moved on with their careers and achieved immense success, we lost the appetite for it, and so did they seemingly. Reminder, being wrong can be so much fucking fun sometimes. Drake versus Kendrick Lamar is the greatest rap beef in hip-hop history. And if it ends here, which it feels like it will and should, then Drake has to add another L to his resume, because the public verdict is in and the people have crowned Kendrick as the winner. And the culture is reveling in this victory. Well, everyone except for his cheerleaders, of course. But guys, give them some grace though, please, because it can't be easy to see your daddy get his shit pushed in front of the entire world. It just can't be. It can't be.
I'm the most lit nigga in the game. Y'all mad, and there's no skeletons in my closet. I'm not no fucking pedophile. Stop. That's the only thing y'all niggas know that can fucking end my run is me being, and it doesn't exist. Stop the bullshit.
When I said what top 5 you smoking on, I don't think you've been present in this culture, my But if we gotta go 5 years without hearing from you, it bothers me. I don't think you're that busy. I don't think your family life is that much. So when I got a who's been playing that role all along, and if you're better than him, you'll do the he's doing times 10. It bothers me. I'm sorry.
Oh, boo-hoo. Let me play a sad song for you on the world's smallest violin.
Me personally, I think Drake lost in a score of 3 rounds to 1, a gentleman's sweep in a valiant but confusingly unprepared and arrogant manner. You see, this whole beef was reignited due to Kendrick allegedly turning down a feature request from Drake for the song First Person Shooter featuring J. Cole, a track that would have been the first time that I can think of personally where the big three were all on one song together. But Kendrick was not buying into none of the bullshit, right? Because he still had issues with Drake that were quietly present for the last decade. This is an interesting factor to consider because there were so many others in the industry who were also having issues with Drake, in particular Metro Boomin, Future, The Weeknd, A$AP Rocky, and Rick Ross, which worked out well for timing purposes because Future and Metro Boomin had announced that they were releasing 2 albums within weeks of each other, and for those 2 albums, Future and Metro, they basically invited everyone who hates Drake to just come through and fire off on that nigga, right? And with that invitation, Kendrick set it off with his Like That verse, and in hindsight, put Drake in a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation, because you don't duck someone for 10 years for no good reason. Because Kendrick, for all intents and purposes, is the complete antithesis to Drake and is the only living, breathing reason as to why the crown was never unanimously given to Drake. Kendrick was always Drake's worst matchup as he was someone who had the mainstream appeal, the talent, the high quality albums, and more importantly, the cosigns from all the important figures in hip hop as well as the audience, which is a direct contrast to Drake, who has always been polarizing amongst the fans and the media. So engaging in a battle with Kendrick was something that nobody, not even his biggest stans, could imagine him doing, let alone winning, and we see why now. An OG of mine once said, "You start with love before the hate." So I'm gonna give Drake his flowers. He had a great performance in his battle outside of the Heart Part 6. And for those who didn't even hear the Heart Part 6, it was basically 4 minutes of Drake saying, "Yo, how am I a liar? If I was having tickle parties with Millie Bobby Brown, I'd be arrested for sure." As if we didn't see Bill Cosby and R. Kelly's freaky asses get away with diddling young girls for decades.
That's hate.
Sorry, that's hate. That's hate. We're not there yet. Something else that I can give Drake props for is that because of his performance, as well as Kendrick's, we got the version of Pacquiao and Mayweather that we all wanted. 2 of the best in our generation going head to head, where at the very least, both sides can agree that it was well worth the 10-year wait. And in spite of people always trying to discredit Drake for not being hip-hop, he has never ducked a fade from anyone. He might have scurried away from, the story of Adidon because Drake scurries, right? But he showed up to battle nonetheless. Now, the truth or the hate, whichever you want to interpret this as. Mistake number 1. You tried to bop, hit, and hook your way into another diss record that could be a hit song like with Back to Back. Only this time, you decided to address the field instead of Kendrick solely. People will rebut and say that Drake had to because they all got together to diss him, but he did that on push-ups already as his first response to Kendrick's Like That verse. So let's cut the bullshit for a second, okay? Because if Drake never responded to Rocky or Ross or Metro, nobody would have given a f because we all knew what the real battle was. And it was the 5'6" menace out of Compton doing prison burpees and all black to soul music. What are you doing right now, man? You also dissed the field to cover up the fact that you don't have that much dirt on Kendrick to begin with. And the dirt that you supposedly dropped on him isn't feasible. Stick with me, Drake stans. Stick with me, please, 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 hear me out. I'm going to explain why. When it comes to using T in a rap battle, I personally hate it because it's a very high risk, high reward maneuver. But that risk is really crazy because T in battle rap is only valid if it's remotely true or kind of true. Like there has to be some merit of truth to the T, because if there isn't, then who gives a fuck, right? You're just making up tall tales. Nigga, J.K. Rowling does that. That's not that impressive. Okay, it is, but like still, like nigga, you're lying, right? This is why Meet the Grahams and Not Like Us hit way harder than Family Matters or The Heart Part 6, because even if Kendrick's T is not 100% true, his claims are easier than Drake's claims to verify. And let's go over Drake's biggest claims in his diss tracks. Number 1, Kendrick is a wife beater.
That was disrespectful, very disrespectful.
Like, that is right in line with classic hip hop, and it's a very smart angle, if it's true, to attack Kendrick's very pristine image in the public, right? I like the tactic, if it's true. Number 2, he alleges that Dave Free, Kendrick's right-hand man, Kendrick's fiance Whitney, and further alleges that those kids are actually Dave Free's and not Kendrick's. He also claimed that Top Dog, Kendrick's former label boss, was extorting him in a song Push-Ups with the whole drop a gimme 50 double entendre, right? But once Kendrick held a mirror up to Drake about how Drake himself was once in a 360 deal for basically the majority of his career, he never revisited that angle. Here are the issues with Drake's angles. We will never get confirmation as to whether or not Dave Free actually Kendrick's fiance or if the kids are really his, because even if it is true, neither party would come out to admit that. And unless Drake is gonna send Chubbs to the Compton clinic and have him do a Raikage dropkick on the doctor to give him the paternity test results, it's cap. So that angle is now dead and null and void. The second angle, Drake attempts to reveal to us, the audience, that KendrickLamar beats his fiance. And personally, I think this is also cap as well too, because unless some police paperwork were to come out or some HIPAA laws get violated and hospital docs get leaked, or even more damning, unless Whitney herself was to come out and say that it happened, it can't be confirmed. So once again, it's null and void. And lastly, the whole Drake gave a mole some fake information to give to Kendrick on purpose, once again, is cap. Because once again, where is the proof? You have been all over social media posting your little weird memes, liking photos, and you mean to tell me that you couldn't post a screenshot of your man's texting Kendrick's man's the false info? No phone calls recorded setting them up? Not even a substantive explanation on the Heart Part 6 of how you orchestrated this master game plan to be called a pedophile of the #1 song in the country? Why not? Why can't you share any information? Trick question, kid, because it's big, fat cap. Hey, buddy. Hey, Aubrey, we're not slow, buddy. And as a matter of fact, you should give some writing credits to the Aubrey's Angels on Twitter for basically ghostwriting the track for you. Because you did not have any explanation besides the fan fiction threads that they made for you overrating your strategies in this battle. Then again, I know you don't like to credit niggas, Quentin Miller on Rico, if it doesn't benefit you to do so. Overall, Drake's approach to this beef reminds me a lot of the story of Icarus. For those who don't know the story, to keep it short and sweet, a man... Sorry guys. A boy named Icarus flew way too close to the sun out of arrogance once he felt the euphoria of being one of the only human beings to be able to fly. However, his wings were bounded together with wax and feathers, and he was warned by his father, who made the wings, to not fly too close to the sun or else the wings will melt, and to also not fly too close to the water or else the wings will get dampened and ruined. Essentially, he had to maintain his balance and fly right in the middle, be balanced in his flight and also in his temperament. But he didn't listen and flew way too close to the sun. His wings melted and he crashed and died. In every battle that Drake has ever been involved in, if things weren't going his way, there were 1,001 different ways for him to come out of it clean. Add in the fact that he does have a win in one of the last major rap beefs after he smoked Meek Mill back in 2015, which is more than likely what led to him getting a big ass head, since Meek was still seen as a serious threat back then instead of the butt of every Twitter joke nowadays. And even when he clearly lost to Pusha T, his ego was still able to pacify him, as well as his fans and stans, basically saying that the loss didn't count because all Pusha T did was gossip about Drake's personal life. And if it wasn't that, it was the idea that Pusha T had violated the rules of rap beef. Look, I hate to be that guy, but unfortunately or fortunately, there are no rules in rap beef. It's a double-edged sword, and if you don't want to deal with the ugliness that can come with it, then take the J. Cole route and back out before shit hits the fan. But when so many embarrassing career-altering events happen to someone like they have in Drake's career, and you only seemingly get stronger after each bump in the road, then it's easy to see how big an imbalanced a person's ego can become. But it's because of Drake's inflated ego and this feeling of being Teflon that has led to this loss to Kendrick, because not only did he lose due to being outskilled and outmaneuvered, Drake lost because he doesn't have that much cultural cachet in hip-hop. At least not as much as Kendrick Lamar. This is where Kendrick's points about Drake come to fruition. You see, Drake has gotten away with a lot in his career, and he has gone through things that should have damaged his career. He got peed on, he got snuffed by Diddy, he got exposed for getting help with his raps, he wears different black culture aesthetics as a costume instead of acclimating himself to it genuinely. And this isn't an attack on his blackness because he's biracial per se, but rather commentary on how culturally he has so many deficiencies when it comes to how he interacts with blackness, because there is no way you should have ever said a line like, "You rapping like you're trying to free the slaves." It's giving house nigga. Even that piece of commentary might cause some divide, but if y'all can't see how fucked up it is that he can't even recognize that, especially since he's been expressing so much underlying disdain with the black community, then I don't know what to tell you. We'll get to that later. Trust me. Furthermore, Kendrick has brought Drake's very weird and disturbing proximity to young girls to the mainstream surface, whereas before, it was only internet fodder. Old videos of him flirting with a 17-year-old on stage, after she told him she was 17, his own father following 17-year-olds, like what the fuck is that about? That ain't no niece or goddaughter, you nasty old fart. But, you know, I guess the apple don't fall far from the tree, right?
Meet the Grahams.
And of course, the old interviews of Millie Bobby Brown talking about how they text often and how Drake gives her boy advice. Billie Eilish even talking about him texting her. Bella Harris, Haley Baldwin, the Jenner girls, young girls saying that he was even at high school basketball games, the girls' high school basketball games, because he's a fan? Oh, he's a fan, all right.
He a fan, he a freaky ass nigga, he a 69 god.
Even the kids in LA and Toronto on TikTok are just casually talking about how girls in their high schools would be at Drake's mansion just hanging out.
I think rich women between like 28 and 33 right now living in LA who have had interactions with Drake can bring him down. They can be the nail in the coffin. So listen, I went to high school between 2011 and 2015, okay? In that time, and I went to a very rich, white, private high school. And during that time, I heard of girls or girl sisters going to Drake's house. We're in high school, okay? And maybe they weren't freshmen, but still, you're still 16 to maybe 18-year-olds, but you're 16, 17 years old going to this grown-ass man's house. If you look up his fucking birth year and look up those years, he was between 27 and 29. He was 29 in 2015. So I know that there are a lot of people out there, maybe with some memories, and it's hard to look back on and be like, holy fucking shit, I was a child. And there was a power dynamic, and this is me being taken advantage of. But you guys need to step up and fucking cancel Drake and, like, just end it. Just end his shit.
Like, gangsta, get off the monkey bars and stay away from the playgrounds. You are a grown man. The tea leaves are all here for us. We just gotta brew the pot. And this is why Kendrick's angles are much better, because even if Drake doesn't have a daughter, there's still so much more that Kendrick said that is being verified at an alarming rate. And with the masterful reads that both Kendrick Lamar and Pusha T did on Drake, pointing out his character flaws with several evaluations of his family dynamics being the reason as to why he has a broken view of marriage and romance, as his father and mother got divorced when he was only 5, and subsequently his father became an absentee parent to him, which goes in conjunction with the idea that Drake himself had fathered a child of his own and abandoned him in the same manner that his father had once abandoned him. History is repeating itself. And look, I don't know if Drake really is a bad father or a PDF file for that matter, but I do think that at the very least, he's a creep who has boundary issues. unironically in the same manner as MichaelJackson. Holy shit. Everything comes full circle, man. Be careful who you compare yourselves to, ladies and gentlemen. And this is also no attack on Mike, but in the same way that I don't know for sure if Mike ever really touched those kids, I still think it's weird that as a grown-ass man, he was around so many kids alone. And furthermore, I think it's even weirder that no one around Mike was going like, yo, nah, Mike, this ain't a good look. Like, why the f do we have a play place in your house? That's not a good look, man. Why are you frolicking with the kids? Because you know Mike frolicked, right? It's a horrible optic. It just looks bad, even if you didn't do anything technically wrong. Just like Drake's inappropriate views and feelings towards the black community. Because if we revisit that Pusha T situation, but more specifically the blackface photo, things continue to look worse. Drake's only official direct response to Pusha T would come from an iPhone Notes app dissertation where he would try to explain why he was in blackface. He essentially tried to spin this story that it was part of an art project in which he was trying to highlight the issues that black actors face in the entertainment industry, being typecasted and limited to roles that involved black stereotypes, as around the time of the photo shoot, he was still an actor on Degrassi. But man, nobody bought that bullshit, and for good reason. I'm not saying that Drake hates black people by any means, at least I hope, or that he doesn't identify with being black, because he does, kinda. I mean, he quote unquote associates himself as a black man, whatever the f that's supposed to mean. It is rather convenient and mostly confusing to hear him take this kind of stance when he's trying to explain away blackface, considering that once his platform grew from the platform that he had back in 2008 when he did the blackface photo shoot, once that platform grew, he never continued to highlight the black plight. And at times he was either silent on black issues or he gave the public very ChatGPT style corporate answers, which goes into what I personally think is the biggest factor that keeps him from being revered in this culture.
Listening to your music is like you're super successful, you're one of the best to ever do it, yet you still have this chip on your shoulder. I remember listening to Diplomatic Immunity. You know, you have the line where you say you're black excellence, but it was come to you, it's not the same though. Like, why do you think that still, like, I guess, that dark cloud is over you, over your head?
Well, I think I've been in a lot of rooms and in a lot of conversations and just I've felt the other side of judgment and, you know, racial judgment sometimes, like being light-skinned, you know, being Canadian, having people that I look up to and respect tell me that I can't identify with what's going on because, you know, and granted, I'm also not the most outspoken person when it comes to political issues. I prefer to talk about it amongst my people, and if we're gonna do something, I prefer to go and make the change or actually do something and not just like post about it so that people are like, oh wow, this guy's really conscious about what's going on.
White America say I'm becoming a threat.
Who told you that?
I used to get teased for being black, and now I'm here and I'm not black enough.
The guys at our school, instead of addressing people like the group, like saying like, what are you guys doing? Say mans like you. Yeah, yo, so mans like you are going to that, and then just means like the group.
Crew. That's interesting.
It's not, it's really ignorant.
Oh.
I know the talks about last year, you know, how we couldn't fly to England, unfortunately, for wireless. But man don't care about all that right now, bro, because you know what? We there awkward.
Oh.
Man's never been in marquee when it's shut down, eh? Trust me, daddy.
Where do I even start? Because this man has been handing us his ass to kiss for a while now in hindsight, but I never fully realized until doing research for this video and listening back to a lot of these woe was me ass lyrics. But let me start with a few things before we go forward, because I don't want my stance to be misconstrued. So let's clarify something very, very quickly. Drake is a black man. To anyone who says that he isn't, you are wrong, and you need to shut the fuck up. To anyone who believes that mixed people with a black parent are not black, come here, real quick, just a little closer. You are wrong, and you need to shut your fucking mouth. Okay? Cool. One of the core tenets of hip-hop has always included speaking for the oppressed, but especially black oppression. Even during the 90s, the golden age of hip-hop, where hip-hop at that point had leaned more into street stories and gangsta aesthetic, as opposed to the more socially conscious messages of Public Enemy, it was always on the minds of prominent MCs because one of the harsh realities that any black person faces in majority white spaces is that no matter how much you rise, there's always going to be some sort of caveat that gets attached to your success, especially when you choose to speak up on matters that could be more divisive to the quote-unquote wider audience. But once hip-hop became more commercialized, labels and corporations, through proper incentivizing, created a lane for those who were just fine with making anthems and generic pop rap. And many were fine with taking this route, as it did prove to be fruitful for some folks. The best example being Flo Rida, as Flo Rida has sold 80 million albums throughout his entire career, placing him in the top 10 list of the highest selling rappers of all time. But what has he ever talked about in his music that wasn't surface level party rap? And keep in mind, nobody has Flo Rida in a top 5 or a top 20 or even top 40 rapper list anywhere.
That's hate.
Which is no diss to him, as anyone, in my opinion, who can even sell 1,000 records would qualify for having a successful music career. But those who are typically mentioned in GOAT combos are people who have made it a point in their music to address the issues that speak to the struggle of oppressed people.
Had a nigga sitting on top of their roofs. Hurricane Katrina, we should've called it Hurricane Bush. Then they telling y'all lies on the news. The white people smiling like everything cool, but I know people that died in that pool.
George Bush doesn't care about black people.
Because while hip-hop can and has evolved, there are aspects that have remained, and speaking up has always been one of them. And this is where Drake obviously loses a lot of hip-hop credibility, because the only things black that Drake talks about in his music are him and the BBL women that he has tickle parties with. It's what made his explanation of the blackface photo from Pusha T's cover art and his lyrics over the years expressing this really weird disdain with the black community that makes things even worse. Like Gangsta, it's not a good look when Eminem, unambiguously white man who sold more records than you ever did, was a man who was always willing to take overt political stances that would have alienated his majority white audience, especially at the height of his career. And you don't say shit, or you barely say shit. Like, you say the bare minimum. And then you have Drake over here with his I was too black for the white kids, too white for the black kids ass lyrics. And the worst part about it is that he's dead ass. So much so that in his mind, he chalks it up to the fact that he resembles untoasted Wonder Bread. As if him being light skinned is the reason why we don't highlight his blackness. Yo, come here, man.
Come here, boy, when I talk to you. Straighten up, goddammit.
To be acknowledged requires the ability to see those who see you.
Sometimes I don't feel celebrated when I know maybe somebody else would be celebrated for those accomplishments, you know? Yeah. I don't feel like people say when Drake is the artist of the decade, I don't think anybody says, wow, a black artist is the artist of the decade. I don't think anybody says that, really. And I associate I associate myself as a black man. So for me, it's sometimes it's something that I just acknowledge and I just keep it moving. But you know, like I said, I feel like if the situation was different, I feel like maybe some of the massive accomplishments and accolades that we've conquered on behalf of all of us, not just me. It's not like it's for all of us, right? Just like how excited I am when anybody else in our space does something great, you know. Yeah, of course, there's a part of me that wishes that I was celebrated a little more, but I mean, who wants to listen to me cry about being celebrated more?
Look, here's the thing. Drake is not obligated to do these things. He is not supposed to be Malcolm X or Martin Luther King. I don't really think any entertainer has an obligation to do anything besides entertain. There are plenty of rappers who talk like revolutionaries in their music, but in real life behave in a total opposite manner. Like Killer Mike talks about unaliving your masters, but also embraces the advantages of capitalism once it directly affects him. Even Jay-Z loves to flirt with certain aesthetics, like his use of Basquiat style locks and name dropping real black revolutionaries in his music. Like, bro, you really must think we ignorant for real, because for you to use that sort of aesthetic just shows how you don't even have a surface level understanding of Jean-Michel Basquiat. But just so there's no confusion, Basquiat fucking hated capitalism, and you are a fucking billionaire. So before you open your mouth, you're a blatant contradiction, you fucking moron. But what do you expect from someone who thinks the term capitalist was made up to tear down black billionaires like himself? No bullshit. Like, he actually said this.
Now, you know, before was the American dream. Pull yourself out of bootstraps and you can make it in America. All these lies that America told us our whole life. And then when we start getting it, they try to lock us out of it. They start inventing words like, you know, capitalist and, you know, things like that.
Bro's hella ass. That nigga's not top 5. Suck my dick, Jay-Z. Oh, that nigga said, for shizzle my nizzle in a song. Like, nigga, what?
In a sea full of hypocrites, I do get where Drake is coming from when he says that he doesn't want to speak up on these issues and come off like he's some sort of pretentious know-it-all celebrity, because trust and believe, we all hate those people. But in the same breath, you can't blame the black community for being reverse colorists and moreover catching attitude with us when we choose to highlight Kendrick and J. Cole instead of you. They have both made it a priority to not only speak on black issues, but touch down on the real-life atrocities that has happened to innocent black victims.
What was your perception when you first heard the news about Michael Brown a week ago?
My perception was, unfortunately, the same perception I had when the man got choked out in Staten Island, and the same reaction I had when the man just graduated college in Charlotte, got in a terrible car accident, survived a car accident, went to the lady's house, knocked on the door for help. She thought he was robbing her, of course, because he's black at your door. She called the cops, they taser him, he dies. The same reaction I had then. Damn, again, this is fucked up. That was my reaction. Now that's sad. I'm ashamed that I had that reaction, because we always had that reaction. For years, that's how we be feeling. It's so regular, we just like, damn, that's fucked up again.
Kendrick even made Auntie Diaries, a song speaking on his own ignorance and growth when it comes to how he views trans folks. And then there's you, who has songs where you're stealing where you're stealing phones out of girls' purses unironically. Like anyway, let's not overlook the fact that J. Cole has a white mother just like you, and yet you think that we care about the color of your mother's skin when we don't even care when it comes to Cole. Cole has gone to rallies for Michael Brown and you make it rain the strip clubs, which is not to say you can't do both, because, you know, duality of man is a real thing. But his attitude, it's like he comes off like he wants credit for just being black and successful, when the only black folks that get to do that under one specific circumstance. And I'll give away the secret right now. If you as a black person want to be celebrated by black folks for just being black and successful without firmly standing for us and with us, then it's simple. Just go dominate and be successful in an area where it's predominantly white. No, seriously, go do that. Because we as black folks, we know what it's like to be black in spaces where, once again, our black asses ain't welcome. So when we see one of our own dominating and being successful in a majority white space, we will lend all our empathy and sympathy and cheer you on, even if your personal life doesn't align with the collective black thought entirely. As long as you're not an overt, we'll ride behind you. And the best modern day example of this would be Tiger Woods, because golf has little to no black people at all, let's just be honest, except for Tiger Woods and probably some nigga in Dakota named Derek, right? Golf is also what I would classify as being a rich man sport, which is any sport where if you're not of a certain socioeconomic status, you literally cannot afford to play it, let alone be good at it. So see sports like polo or race car driving, or even like sailing on a boat as examples of what I'm talking about. So to see a black man not just playing golf, but absolutely dominating golf, Tiger garnered a lot of support from the black community, because we all know there had to have been a fair amount of golfers and fans of the sport who were not happy to see his black ass dominating on the golf course. But we were, that's for sure. And you better believe that if a black man, especially one who's tapped into the culture, ever starts dominating hockey, that jersey is going platinum in every black neighborhood near you. But Drake is a black man in hip-hop, a genre and culture that is black as fuck. So my brother, you gotta be more than just the token black man that white America loves, even if you think they don't love you. And furthermore, you can't engage in nasty tactics like musical imperialism.
You know, again, your appetite starts to grow, and R&B music or songs like Best I Ever Had, you know, aren't enough to satisfy the palate. You want more, you know, you want to tap into different things. And I think I'm, you know, probably the biggest case of that, where it's just like, I've almost left no genre untouched at this point.
Alright, so going into this next section, let's just establish imperialism. See, imperialism is the practice, theory, or attitude of maintaining or extending power over foreign nations, particularly through expansionism, employing both hard power and soft power. Imperialism focuses on establishing or maintaining hegemony in a more or less formal empire. And just for even more clarification, hegemony is simply dominance over others. How does this apply to Drake? Simple. This is the method that Drake has used to maintain the longest run of relevancy in hip-hop history. You see, Drake has been accused of being a shameless wave rider and culture vulture from as early as 2010. Whatever's trending at the moment, Drake will find a way to attach himself to it, whether it's being a fan of 5,000 different sports teams and different athletes across a various amount of sports, or linking up with artists who have some sort of virality or a legit musical wave, or even now with social media trends. Like, if you want a true litmus test to gauge whether something is truly trending or not, just look at Drake's IG page and observe for about 5 to 10 business days, and I promise you it won't take too long to get your answer. And fans have called out this behavior for a while now. You see, Drake and his team are very calculated individuals, scientists if you will, because he has had the privilege of watching so many other legends come and go and observe what they did to garner that mass audience, and in turn figured out what led to their fall off. And a lot of times when rappers start falling off, it's, they make the same desperate attempts to follow the new trendy sound that has already surpassed their own, and it always comes off cringy.
This one's for my hustlers. Bang, bang, bang. Good lawyers if they cuff ya. Bang, bang, bang.
See, what Drake did, however, was keep his eye close to the market and look out for what was coming up, and put himself right in the middle of it just before it really took off, which gave the casual fans the impression that he was early to those acts and actually popularized them. Some examples to point to would be his remix of songs like Migos' Versace, Future's Tony Montana, I Love Makona's Tuesday track, and his early promotion of The Weeknd and borrowing that dark, murky sound for his album Take Care, which he would later go on to downplay as treating The Weeknd as just some guy who may or may not help with just 5 songs. And honestly, the list can go on for days. And because he had his own star power, he was always able to make it happen, especially when it came to music, because if you're an up-and-coming artist and Drake hits you up wanting to do a remix to your most viral track or invites you to a studio session, you know, but more importantly, he knows that you're gonna say yes. Even some of the newer generation of artists have openly caught on to his method of just wave riding.
Definitely Drake, like, I was low-key waiting for him. Because I knew, hey, he's gonna come. He's gonna come. So I was waiting for that follow, and hey, he was there.
So why is this bad? Why is expanding your reach to different markets a bad thing? Why is popping up in places that have nothing to do with music a bad thing? Can't he just be a fan of everyone and like everything? That's just it. No. Questions like why Drake can't, dabble in, Jamaican accents when he does dance hall. All you Toronto niggas be like, yo, bro, like, why can't Drake just do it? Like, yo, there's mad Jamaicans in Toronto, fam. Why can't Drake just do a Jamaican accent, bro? We got mad diversity up here, bro. Well, bro, let me tell you why, bro. In real life, imperialism has impacted societies in so many countless negative ways. It led to the slave trade, which then led to social discrimination around the entire world. It also damages the cultures and created conflicts amongst natives. And last, but certainly not least, imperialism strips countries of their natural resources and leaves nothing for the natives. Just look at the entire OVO roster and tell me that a label of genuinely talented artists never getting a big push and being relegated to being just in-house writers and producers for the biggest artists in the world while being under the biggest artists in the world doesn't sound like what I just described. Or even his behavior with new artists and new trends. You take the swag and the sauce from the new creative niggas and catch them just before they blow up. And if they last, you look like you have a great eye and ear for talent. But if they don't, which odds are they're not, and they become one-hit wonders that the public really just forgets about, then the public will then blame them for not taking advantage of the opportunity that they were given. It's genius. Evil genius. And that's exactly what happens when you use your star power under the guise of linking up with people on good terms. You see, when you do that, it takes away shine from those who actually need it and further increases your own power without considering the potential momentum halter it could be. And yes, sure, there are some people like The Weeknd who were able to avoid that trap and even go on to surpass Drake in terms of star power and discography. But for every weekend, there's a party next door and an I Love Makona. When Drake said, y'all need to catch up, after the release of his Honestly Nevermind album, oh, I caught up. I caught up for real.
It's all good if you don't get it yet. It's all good. That's what we do. That's what we do. We wait for you to catch up. We're in here though. We caught up already. On to the next. My goodness.
It makes it even more eerie when looking at his constant references to Michael Jackson and him being Michael Jackson. You see, we get so caught up when artists today compare themselves to Michael and assume that they're talking about Michael the singer, or Michael the performer, or Michael the icon, that we forget about Michael the businessman. The same Michael Jackson who bought the catalogs of legendary musicians, essentially owning these people's music.
Traded several $1 billion for Sony. Several billion. And they really thought that my mind is always on music and dancing, and it usually is, but they never thought that this performer, myself, would outthink them. Now I'm a free agent. I just owe Sony one more album. It's just a box set, really, with 2 new songs, which I've written ages ago. So I'm leaving Sony a free agent, owning half of Sony. I own half of Sony's publishing, and I'm leaving them, and they're very angry at me because of it, but I just did good business, you know? The way they get revenge is to try and destroy my album.
And with the conflicts that Drake finds himself in, and him making these more ominous allusions to his newfound power in the music industry, it makes his goals much clearer to grasp, as well as his methods of achieving them. By linking with artists like Popcorn, he taps into the dancehall market that is dominant in the Caribbean. By linking with Georgia Smith, Central C, Skepta, and Dave, and doing freestyles on British platforms, he's capturing the UK market. By linking with people like Lil Baby, Playboi Carti, Yeet, or even Sexy Red, he comes off as not being quote-unquote stuck in the past and being tapped into what's going on with the youth who may not have grown up with Drake, but like the idea that he's showing love to their current favorite artists. And by following and interacting with people like Israel Adesanya, he's attaching himself to MMA, a community and sport that hasn't been too attached to hip-hop. And by doing a dance album, he's yet again capturing another market and another genre, as even though the album was mostly diet, dance, and house music, it became one of the biggest dance albums ever released. Imagine that. Imagine a dance album that you can't even dance to has the ability to be one of the most successful albums in the entire genre. This is real life Monopoly, and Drake's end goal is much more aspirational than just being the biggest rapper in the world, especially because he's already done that. He wants to capture all the markets before it's all said and done, no matter what happens to the natives to those cultures and genres, or whatever happens to his peers who gave him the hip-hop credibility that he desperately yearned for once upon a time, or whatever happens to the up-and-comers who looked up to him. Just ask Quentin Miller.
I never got a publishing check off of any Drake songs.
Wait. You never got a publishing check off of any Drake song?
No. I never got a single publishing check off any songs.
In my previous Drake video, I explained my position on Drake's credibility with the pen and ghostwriting as a whole in hip-hop, and used a chef analogy to try and explain my stance on the ghostwriter debacle. If you're a chef who's world-renowned and makes great entrees and great desserts, but you meet another chef who's also great, but has some similar recipes that are stronger than your versions, is it really such a crime to collaborate on a dish that he's just more well-versed in making? Does him being better at making a souffle and you working with him on your souffle make you any less of a great chef? No, dummy, because teamwork makes the motherfucking dream work. And if you need help in areas that aren't your strong suit, then go get the goddamn help. Because at the end of the day, you're both talented and capable of creating greatness without each other. And I still stand by the idea of music being a collaborative process, especially when it comes to mainstream music, regardless of genre. However, if I continue to expound on my chef analogy, I believe that a chef is only as good as his recipes are and his execution of said recipes. So that means that we would also need to know for sure that those recipes were cultivated and crafted by that chef. Because while collaboration is fine to get a great finished product, if we're not certain of your creations actually being yours, that you claim are yours, then how are we to grade you as a chef? This is coming from some overlooked parts in the whole Quentin Miller ghostwriting saga, because if we look back at the Rico verse that Drake did for Meat Mill that started the entire situation, well then the situation starts to look very, very suspicious. And keep in mind, the OVO camp stated that Quentin was a co-writer, not a ghostwriter. For the most part, that was true, as Drake himself, in his open letter to those who contributed to the creation of If You're Reading This Is Too Late, credited Quentin, referring to him as QM. But for that infamous Rico verse, Quentin Miller did indeed lay down a reference track for that song. And in this reference track, you can hear what exactly Drake took from the reference to do his Rico verse. He used the same opening line, "The girl of your dreams to me is probably not a challenge," and even used one of the more standout rhyme schemes, "I might go Tony Montana and caught me some Shaq at the free throws." And the kicker to all of this is that Drake did not credit Quentin Miller for his contribution to that feature, and it's very obvious as to why he wouldn't. And the eerie part about this is that when doing research for this section of the video, I found an old Complex article where they also corroborated the idea that Quentin was a ghostwriter on certain occasions as opposed to a co-writer, like how the OVO representatives were trying to state. And they removed a lot of material, like the screenshots of Quentin not being credited on the album's official liner notes. And when you put this in conjunction with Drake's Fader magazine interview, where he had this really weird, ambiguous, it is what it is kind of attitude toward the reference tracks, and him saying that, you know, he's fine with being the poster boy for ghostwriting when his peers hide behind him and do the same thing. And furthermore, even more reference tracks getting leaked of his own songs, where he's no longer just using the flow or theme of the reference track as a starting point for his own verse. He's now basically parroting the lyrics. It's unsettling and very unsatisfactory. And to make things worse, he would go on to do a Rap Radar interview in December 2019, in his own home, by the way, keep that in mind because that's very important, where he would finally speak with the conviction and clarity about who is responsible for what in his discography.
Wrote by the way, all my biggest songs and any song that really did damage for me, I've wrote every single lyric. Not the hits and the ones that you would like. It's like I'm not gonna collaborate with somebody on any of the timestamp records. I'm not collaborating with anybody on, Marvin's Room or, like the R&B records that are, other than me and Party. Like, I love working with Party.
When you say the timestamp.
But here's the thing. Why did it take you 4 years to say this? And furthermore, why didn't you credit QM for his work on Rico? Now, people might be saying that it's just one song, why are you harping on it? Because it's simple, your credibility is now tainted. It only takes one apple to spoil the bunch. In the court of law, if one piece of evidence has been tampered with or is unreliable, it can tank your entire argument and credibility, and the same thing applies here. If you're telling us that QM only helped with 5 songs and you credit him for said 5 songs, and then we find out that he actually helped with another one that you didn't give him credit for, then how do we now know what is true about who is responsible for what in your discography? How do we know that you didn't utilize ghostwriters back then and then have them sign some, super ironclad NDA to keep the facade going? How do we know that you actually wrote what you said you did when your initial position was passive and ambiguous? And all of this in an interview that was done in your home, produced by you, probably edited by you who is also one of the best actors in the world, not trying to be funny, but I've seen Degrassi and I know you're good at conveying certain emotions to your audience. But I don't know. I guess we'll never really know for sure until we get some sort of 30 for 30 style documentary 20 years later or so. Drake is still one of the most important figures in hip-hop history. There's just a lot that just came with his presence in the genre. But I guess I'll end it with this. I believe that Drake is hip-hop, despite those that would say he's just a pop star. I think that he's been good and bad for the musical ecosystem, and I don't think he's the GOAT. On his best day, he's probably a top 3 hip-hop artist of all time, like a really nice, warm, summery day. But in general, I'd probably put him closer to the 5 or number 6 spot. Because at the end of the day, he's a legend forever and is one of the most important figures in hip-hop history. And if you were to remove him from hip-hop, the genre would not be what it is today, simple and plain.